All right. Welcome to April 4th Loki Community Call. Particularly, I don't know, excited and excitable this week because we are in a mad dash to finish 3.0 release for next week. So 3.0 is not really a secret at this point. We talked about it, I don't know, a couple weeks ago at least. And it's been an adventure the last few months, but we are full steam ahead on releasing 3.0 for basically for next week to coincide with GrafanaCon. Let me share my screen here. So the only thing on the agenda today that really I had to talk about was 3.0 itself. Everybody wants to add anything else, please feel free to. But we'll kind of go down through, talk about these features a bit, and I don't know, I want to kind of talk about expectations a little bit because not everything is exactly where we were hoping it would be, but there's lots of good stuff in this release. So yeah, Owen, you're our expert on bloom filters, which is kind of the
scary thought.
cornerstone. Yeah, tell us about it. Tell us about what they are. And
yeah, I'm sure. So there's gonna be I'm preparing a talk for next week at GrafanaCon, which will kind of go into this stuff a little bit more in depth and have some nice graphics and things like that. But yeah, so we've been working on a bloom filters edition into Loki for I started specking out the idea like 6 months ago. And we're going to release kind of an experimental preview of that with 3.0. It's certainly not, it's, we're at the make it work stage, not the, make it, not make it fast, make it cheap, make it elegant, none of those things yet, but it should be, you can play around with it. Basically, the idea here is, let's see if I can do the 20-second elevator pitch. Bloom filters, probabilistic data structure, very space efficient. We mix that with a kind of technique called engrams, which are just sequential sets of characters. And so we basically, it allows us to kind of index or store everything in log lines in bloom filters. And then you can kind of reconstitute queries, particularly filter expressions, and check the bloom filters for the engrams that constitute the filter expression, and then potentially, remove a lot of data that pre-filter out a bunch of chunks that you wouldn't need to query because you can guarantee that they won't match your query. So that's really attractive as we start seeing a lot of people go from using Loki as a very, very targeted search tool to a tool where it's very common now for people to send a lot of kind of very broad label selectors, but looking for stuff like, a transaction ID or, a support, a UUID referencing a support case, things like that. And so the idea here is that we can use that to filter out a lot of data, not need to query it, because at some point it stops becoming efficient to query huge swaths of data. Loki is always, for years, we basically focused on like making Loki, higher scale, faster at processing data, but now we're really starting to pivot a little bit and focus on reducing the need to do that when we can. And so this is particularly kind of opens up some newer, makes certain types of queries a lot more feasible now. But it should also just work in general to accelerate queries that use filter expressions, which is pretty much all of them. Yeah, needle in a haystack is the word I didn't mention, but that's kind of that's the type of query where you'll see a huge amount of benefit from this. So we've been running this ourselves for a little while, seeing up to around, maybe 90% filter rates on these sorts of UUID queries. Still think there's a lot of room to push that up, but all things in good time. Rome wasn't built in a day, yada, yada.
Yeah. So, Yeah, super excited about this because we run a lot of Loki, and when we did some stats on this in the fall, it was nearly 70% of the time our queryers spend executing query are on searches effectively that fall into this category, or sort of specifically, they spend about 70% of their time searching and not finding any results. So they're basically looking through logs that don't match the query expression. This ends up being because of the sort of commonality of using your, Loki was built for operators and developers, but is used a lot by lots of other business functions. And, we call this kind of a support style business function where, this is also something that developers and operators do too. But it's more common applied in this way where folks don't really know how to narrow their search down. Like they maybe don't know anything about the infrastructure, so they're not really good at picking labels. They don't really know the time frame, plus or minus maybe even a day or a few days. And that can be hundreds of terabytes of logs for large customers. And Loki's good at what it does, which is brute forcing these types of logs. But when your volumes get to be that big, the economics of brute forcing that aren't really quite as good as they are for lots of the other types of queries Loki does. So augmenting those kinds of searches with these really, space optimized Bloom filters, which have this really nice feature of being confident in telling you where not to look. So it's, I don't know if a negative index is the thing you would say for something like this, but the idea is we can now save ourselves from looking and that significant query time where there was no result to be found in the first place. They can false positive, and then we'll go search and then, be able to do the filter. But that's, that false positive rate is tunable in, single digit percentage. So this can, have a huge impact. But we are still, working hard at making it better. The, core pieces of it will be in 3.0, so you'll be able to play around with it. It's not going to be production ready, not for, I don't know, maybe another month or so. Stay tuned there. Very excited though. It'll be a sort of a big asset to a common use case that we see with Loki.
Yeah, I think the part that I'm most excited about here is that it's configurationless, right? So there's like no external complexity that is kind of forced on users. It'll just take the queries that are sent to Loki that use filter expressions, and it will just automatically test for those things. Mm-hmm. So that was probably the biggest challenge here, was finding a way to be able to do query acceleration, which is traditionally done via indexing in some form or another. And do that in a way that wouldn't require us to introduce schemas and kind of violate that kind of core principle of Loki, which is, we just operate on a list of bytes and don't really introspect what's inside until, the user tells us to. So yeah, anyways, very excited about it. Will be fun to kind of reveal.
Yeah. So the next thing on this list here is sort of new. I'm looking now. I don't think I can show you though. I wanted to show, but I think we've decided that you're gonna have to watch a GrafanaCon presentation to see a demo of what we're calling explore logs. So what this is, I guess, at least what I'm gonna call it. Although I'm not the expert here, so apologies if we end up rebranding this a bit, but this is essentially a queryless experience for using your log. So one of the things that's a kind of recurring theme as Loki's adoption grows and we grow from being like Prometheus but for logs, where our user base is familiar with a query language, PromQL, which Loki is largely patterned after, and these concepts of labels, to a world where folks are maybe not using Prometheus at all, that have lots of logs but don't have Prometheus as a metrics database, or don't know about the infrastructure labels and aren't interested in learning. And even if they were, sometimes discoverability here is hard. So So this is a user experience that lets you navigate your infrastructure without having to type a query. So doing some really nice things, including, recognizing patterns in log lines and displaying them, the key value pairs, parsing your log lines in order to show you, very quickly individual graphs for each element of the log line itself. A lot of really cool stuff here. Maybe I can sneak a screenshot in here in a minute, at least to show you what it looks like. But we're really excited about this because there's a whole world of folks out there that, are not particularly interested in learning another query language. I can understand that. The Loki's query language is interesting, like a lot of things, how it's developed over time. Some aspects of it are really good. Some of it needs some work, but if we can sort of engage with folks in the platform without having to have a query language at all, I think that's a big win as well. So I don't know if anybody joined that was working on this more closely that has anything to add to that, or if we can kind of move forward to.
I think that's good.
All right. All right. So next exciting things. The feature here that we're releasing in Loki is really called structured metadata. However, the part that I think most folks care about is that it allows for Loki to have a native OTel ingestion endpoint and a much better open telemetry user and query experience. So if you've tried to use Loki with open telemetry now and you use the open telemetry collector, what happens is this metadata that exists on open telemetry lines is sort of more expansive than what Loki was built for. Loki was built for very minimal amounts of metadata, and they go right into the index. So just, a few key value pairs to identify your logs. So we didn't have a good solution for that. And what ended up happening in the collector was that metadata gets serialized into the log line by basically wrapping the log line with another JSON wrapper with that metadata. And then at query time, you have to, parse it with JSON and to sort of unwrap that. But now Loki has a place called structured metadata for this additional metadata. So this is for data that basically does not exist or belong in the index. Maybe it's high cardinality, maybe it just doesn't even make sense to index it. But also doesn't really belong in the log line either because it's not log content, it's metadata. So now we have structured metadata. That's where all the open telemetry associated resources and attributes will go. And because it's being stored separate from the log line, now when you run your queries, you'll just see the log line, but also get that attached metadata. And this should create much better experience for those using open telemetry. As well as Loki itself in 3.0 has native OTLP endpoints. So you can just write OTLP, open telemetry line protocol, directly to Loki. Pause if there's any other questions or feedback.
I think this is a really cool one because it kind of the first stage of us natively supporting open telemetry in a lot of parts of the Loki experience, right? So mainly focus on ingestion here, right? There's still going to be some work to do to find better ways to expose this to UIs and things like that, but it's just being able to automatically send us stuff is a really, really good start. And then you can obviously still query it and everything. It's just we'll need to build out better UIs that kind of natively understand open telemetry concepts so the users don't have to write queries to do that.
All right. So last sort of, my focus for the last month or so has been all in the world of Helm charts. Can't say that I'm still much of a fan of Helm, but I am at least a lot better understanding it and sort of empathizing with the folks that use it. It is kind of the de facto way to run stuff in Kubernetes. Historically, we've and still internally use something called JSON, but that does not have much adoption. So we've always had this world where we're kind of, a bit fragmented with how we run and configure Loki versus how everybody else does it. So we're closing the gap now. The Helm chart it's been updated to support the microservices deployment mode. Building in Memcache is part of the deployment. The configs, the things that we're running, how we're configuring Loki are all being sort of pushed into the Helm chart. Our goal is to actually internally replace our operations using JSON with Helm. this tool that we built called Tonka has the ability to vendor and deploy Helm charts. It's really nice. It's actually a really nice way to use Helm. If you're not familiar, I would check that out. One of the things that Helm kind of frustrated me with is lack of sort of built-in diff support and I don't know, just the sort of life cycle that it follows. I find a bit frustrating. So Tonka is kind of maybe a nice way to, but we're not here to talk about Tonka. Just talk about how much the Helm chart has been improving. So it now can support running Loki in a single binary, what we call our simple scalable deployment mode, which is a middle ground between microservices and single binary. All three of those are in the chart. They can be separately configurable. You can move between them. I got to write docs for that still, but the goal here is for us to try to finally deprecate the other 4 5 Helm charts that have been created over the years and have just one that we're using that, you know, we can keep building a better experience around. So I wanted to, and I'll post the link to it here. My goal was to have like a release candidate and some docs and stuff for folks to be able to test out, because the last part of this is there's a lot that's changing in 3.0 around kind of some internal. So as a major release, we are taking the opportunity here to break some stuff, mostly configs and some metrics. So there's a long history of how Loki got where it is today, and as a result, it's had a lot of metrics that have like a Cortex prefix in them or don't have a Loki prefix. So we've fixed, I believe, all of those, updated a lot of defaults, removed some code that maybe should have been added in the first place. We're also doing something now too, which is a bit of a shift for the project, but the reality is we can't support, we're just at the limit or beyond the limit of what we can really support in terms of the way Loki runs and operates. So, you know, the very early days, Loki used to have a dependency on a third-party index like DynamoDB or Bigtable or Cassandra. It's been several years, I mean, nearly 3 years or more now since we've run Loki with any of those types of external index. The BoltDB shipper index replaced them, like I said, more than 3 years ago now. And then TSDB has superseded that, which is a similar model of, you know, Loki has its own index and moves it in and out of object storage. So we are deprecating support for Cassandra, Bigtable, DynamoDB. We didn't remove any of the code yet. Probably won't happen until, we'll say, 4.0. But at this point, it's been so long since we've run Loki with anything like that. All of the new features, bloom filters, deletes, line deletes, TSDB and its ability to do dynamic sharding, like all of that stuff only works on the TSDB index. So if you are using those external indices, I'm sorry to say that those sort of, you know, support for that has kind of come and gone, and ultimately those code paths will be removed. Like I said, not super soon. I would say probably another year, but it is long past time for everyone to upgrade to TSDB as their index and also v13 as their schema, because that's where all of the new development is. So as that, you know, related to that, there's a few updates within 3.0, some config changes we had to move around that unfortunately weren't easy to do without just forcing a break. So you more likely than not might need to make a couple changes to your config file to run 3.0. We got a big long upgrade guide that's going to detail that as best we can. But yes, the good news here, I mean, I apologize for, you know, the experience, but what we're trying to do is set ourselves up for the next 5 years of success. Believe it or not, Loki is more than 5 years old now. Its 5-year birthday was in December. I believe it's actually, well, that was from the sort of initial announcement of it as a project. But so now we're trying to set ourselves up for, you know, long-term support and maintainability and stability of the project. Lots of new features to come for sure, but 3.0 I think is a big milestone in the direction of like having a much more opinionated tool in terms of how it's built, how it's run, how you should operate it, how we operate it, and hopefully all of that makes it a lot easier for everyone to use. Yeah.
Well put.
Thanks. I'm like, man, I feel like I've been talking for a couple minutes now.
Yeah. Better you than me.
So that's all I had. I got a whole bunch of breaking change PRs to go merge if we don't have anything else to talk about. Where I will have, so I will post it here. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but there's in the community Slack, I made this channel called Loki 3. Turns out you can't do a dot in a Slack channel name, so that's not Loki 3.0. I had all kinds of great intentions here about what I could have done and when. Created this. And if you are willing to go sort of, try installing it, your sort of stuff, like what's missing here is what I'd like to have at least is if you're using the Loki distributed Helm chart, which I believe is probably one of the most widely used Helm charts. It's a community built and supported chart. I want to replace it with the Loki chart in its new distributed mode, and there should be a way to migrate between those charts, but don't have the instructions for that yet. It's always gonna be a bit tedious because Helm, it isn't necessarily Helm's fault. Like you can't sort of change the ownership of a stateful set or a deployment between charts. So it'll be a function of essentially installing both charts at the same time and scaling resources up and down. As long as the both installs have the same member list config, they'll join the same cluster, and you can kind of scale one up and scale the other down. So I want to put some docs together for that because I don't think that's going to be too hard for folks, and then they can be on this chart, which has more opinions and better opinions around running Loki. But my goal is I'm going to try to. We have a kind of a release candidate in built now. I don't know what I'll have to publish. And try to find some images that we can push out that folks can test. Because I guess I'm looking for feedback on what's missing from our upgrade guide, like where, lots of configs out there, lots of folks having run Loki and configured it from years ago that maybe there's a config that we didn't account for on the upgrade guide, and kind of looking for feedback to help make sure everybody's experience is as smooth as we can make it. Yeah. Anybody? I want to stop sharing for just a second. And then I'm going to reshare. So, I do this real quick. You're going to get a real quick peek. Was told that this is okay. So this is what the new Explore Logs app looks like. What we're looking for here is a way to make it really easy to be able to see what labels that are on your logs, be able to do quick things like say, only show me errors. From my errors, be able to say like, what errors are the most common. Let me go back a little bit here. Oh, too far. Oh, now you get it in light mode. And this is a really, really cool thing too. Pattern features, be able to like look at the different patterns of log lines and exclude them. So like, these commonly occurring patterns, exclude them from your search to be able to narrow down specific types of things. Again, detected fields, being able to quickly see. This is the sort of, rough idea. That's all you get. If you want to learn more. Check out GrafanaCon. Check out the presentations at GrafanaCon. Check out Loki 3. You'll probably need a very new version of Grafana. I don't think that the code that's in this is going to ship in whatever the most recent release Grafana is, but we'll find some instructions somewhere. But pretty excited about this too.
There will be instructions in the README. You need Loki 3 and Grafana 11.
Okay.
All right.
Yep, sounds good.
Any questions or comments? No? Going once, going twice. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to getting all this ready and having it out available early next week. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Ed.